Hey everybody, welcome into episode 12 of the Jack Cohen podcast. Today I'm joined once again by Valerie, Preactor of WBAL Radio and 98 Rock Sports. Valerie, why don't you just give everybody a recap about what you do for WBAL Radio?
Yeah, so every morning, Monday through Friday, I am on the C4 and Brian Neiman show on WBAL radio. And for 98 Rock, I'm on the morning show with Justin Scott and Spiegel. So, two very different styles of morning shows. One is news talk radio, and the other is comedy. So, I get my full cup every morning. And I do live hits from 5 a.m. until 9. So, up bright and early, ready to break news or just recap from the night before. So, baseball season is great, but we also cover the Ravens and the Orioles. So we have all of those games on both stations. So sadly, the Ravens season wrapped up where I was the pregame co-host alongside two of my other colleagues. And then for the Orioles, I host a daily pregame for each game during the week. And so that's going to come up real soon with pitchers and catchers reporting very soon.
Great. And as you just said, pitchers and catchers, why don't we hop into Orioles baseball? Obviously, the last couple of days, there's been some signings. Ramon Laureano.
Yeah.
Um, Earlier this offseason, Tyler O'Neill, Gary Sanchez, Tomoyuki Sagano, Charlie Morton, Andrew Kittredge, um, Dylan Carlson. It's been a quantity over quality offseason, definitely for the Orioles. Some fans aren't happy about it, but I think when you get some solid outfielders in Laureano, O'Neill, and Carlson, none like huge names, but I think when you have three of them to pair with Mullins and Kjerstad and Kowser, I think it's going to be a pretty good outfield bunch. So who is going to be looked on the most in spring training as they need to have a huge impact?
I'm glad you remembered all of those names because I definitely did not. None of them were super notable. Like you said, I mean, there was no big Corbin Burns signing where that's,
Right.
easy to remember. He's going to be a huge ace. I think Charlie Morton, Andrew Kittredge, and the Sugano ones are probably going to be the biggest impact. Obviously, yes, you need a right fielder to replace Anthony Santander, but now they have a slew of different outfielders to do that. So it looks like, and remember, you still have Ryan O'Hearn who can play out there, who I guess
Right.
mostly won't because you have so many options. But remember, Jorge Mateo also coming off the injured list at some point this season. We're not sure when after undergoing elbow surgery, but he was also an outfield asset too. So I think they have so many options with depth that you're going to see a lot of these guys, I would assume, start, if not in AAA, then really not playing every day, obviously, because that normal rotation, at least for, center and left field, is pretty locked down between Cedric Mullins, Colton Cowser, and Heston Kjerstad. I don't believe Heston Kjerstad's going to start in the minors, but you never know. But I think for the guys that they have signed, it's really also about how much experience they have. These guys have a lot of experience. They've been on a couple of other teams. And because of what the Orioles have shown in the playoffs, being so young, and that's really been such a weakness for them. I think having guys that are over 30 and whether they have playoff experience or not, they have league experience, and that already trumps what Jackson Holliday has done. So I think when you're looking at a guy like that to maybe take a step forward this year, you can look at all those signings and say, well, they're veterans, so they could be smart moves for the Orioles just because they bring that level of experience that their young core just doesn't have. And so when you're looking at spring training, obviously you're looking at pitchers, but it's just not the full picture. But those outfielders, it's going to be a battle between Dylan Carlson and you've got Tyler O'Neill, who to me, that was, out of the gate, that's a great signing. But
Right.
now with Lugano in it as well, I think this is just, it's going to be a good core. And so spring training is always exciting to see the younger guys come out, but now you're seeing the older guys really starting to make that appearance too.
Yeah, and one last baseball thing before we hop into some football and NBA. Who do you think will be the ace? Grayson Rodriguez, Zach Eflin. Obviously, it's been a debate on social media. I think it should be Zach Eflin. Obviously, Rodriguez. Can he stay healthy? Huge question. You need your ace to be healthy. Eflin had a great stint with the Orioles last season, kept the Orioles in it in the wild card game. And I mean, I see no reason not to start Eflin. And some people could argue, well, there's reason to start Rodriguez too.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up Eflin because I honestly was kind of going through all of the younger pitchers in my head today and I forgot about him completely, but he's huge. I do think he's your ace. Obviously, Charlie Morton to me is like that Kyle Gibson in the locker room that's, a 40-year-old who's been around forever but has great stuff and he's an innings eater. That's what you need, especially with the season being so long and how injured we saw the pitchers get last year. So adding him along with Sugano is great. But yeah, I think they are gonna again rely on those younger guys. They're gonna get Kyle Bradish back at some point. Dean Kramer, a lockdown pitcher. I think he's just taken strides every single season to get better and better. I love that duo of Dean Kramer and Kyle Bradish, by the way. So they just really play so well off of each other in the rotation. But yeah, I think Zach Eflin is your new Corbin Burns this year. He showed that at the end of the season. Just a great guy all around, such a team player, and he's ridiculous. So I think it's just a match made in heaven when he came over here. And I can't wait to see what a full season looks like for him in Baltimore. And also, I think just the pitchers in general. I know everyone's looking at strikeout rates and ERA and stuff like that more than wins now. We were talking about it this morning, but the left field wall coming in is going to be a huge advantage to hitters, not necessarily pitchers. But I still think it's going to, mess some guys up that with the changing, I don't know that they're going to be able to approach it in the same way that they have, for the last 2 years or even the 5 years prior when you're looking at certain veterans. So, yeah, I keep going back to Eflin now that you mentioned that. I think he's great. But yes, Rodriguez, huge. Also bringing up Cade Povich. I think that guy has good
Yeah.
stuff. And I can't wait to see him just settle into the majors because he's got that quiet confidence that when he goes out there and throws 7 innings of shutout baseball, I'm in. Just put me all in on Cade Povich. I love it. So I think they've got such a great core as long as they stay healthy with this new strength and conditioning, method, coordinator, whatever. I think they should be in good shape.
Yeah, definitely what you said about Cade Povich, quiet success. I think that's a great quote to describe Cade Povich as because he'll go out there, he'll throw 5 and 2/3, 6 innings of ball, and sometimes the offense just doesn't heat up. I feel like there's specific pitchers. Obviously, last year we saw it beginning of the season. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was Kramer, where Kramer would go out, throw some great baseball, but the bats would not heat up. He'd allow one run, maybe it was bloop single or something, maybe an error, but the bats would just not heat up. And speaking of not being able to perform in big spots, let's go over to the Ravens. Obviously, lost in Buffalo. I know this seems like a while ago, but what do you think the Ravens need to do to take the next steps? Obviously, Cooper Kupp, Miles Garrett, both on the market for huge trade possibilities for Baltimore. Obviously, fans already doing trades with possibly Mark Andrews and some guys in the secondary, Brandon Stevens. Where do you stand on maybe getting Kupp and Garrett?
Look, I would love to have both of them here in Baltimore. I think they're both great guys, and they're the type of locker room material that the Ravens look for every year. I don't necessarily think they need an edge rusher like Miles Garrett when they have Kyle Van Noy and Odafe Owe producing the way that they have. I mean, they've got more than 20 sacks between them, which is just insane in one season. So I think, but they're combined basically a Miles Garrett. So, if you have another Miles Garrett, it would be great. But I just don't know that the Ravens have that many really hot trade pieces. Like, yes, you mentioned Brandon Stevens. He, for sure, maybe even a Tylen Wallace, if anybody's interested in that.
Yeah,
There's a couple, Nelson Aguilar. I just don't feel like they got big names to trade that with because those are two really top tier players in Miles Garrett and Cooper Kupp. And I just don't think the Ravens have that sort of firepower with the guys that are free agents. I mean, I think they're going to re-sign Ronnie Stanley. If not, that may be it. If the Rams need an offensive lineman, then they might have one in Ronnie Stanley. But I think the Ravens really love to keep homegrown guys. So I think you're going to see them keep Ronnie. I think you're going to see them keep Mark Andrews. Like, yeah, he's not. I don't think he's going to be a trade piece because of what happened in Buffalo. Obviously, it's devastating. But what happened happened, and what I keep thinking about every year, this is going to happen. You have got three, four of the best quarterbacks in the same conference that play each other year in and year out. It is a brick wall that Lamar Jackson is trying to get through by playing Joe Burrow twice a year, if not three times. And then you got to play Josh Allen once or twice a year. You got to play Patrick Mahomes once or twice a year. And it's hard to win just those 6 or 8 games and call it a season because that is truly the poison for Lamar Jackson. He can't get past that. I mean, it's just it hasn't worked yet. And so I don't know what the secret formula is going to be for them because this was the team. To me, to
Yeah.
everybody, they had all the pieces on the offense. The defense finally figured it out, which I'm totally fine with them not figuring out in the beginning because the offense was picking up the slack and then being able to really click toward the end. I think in baseball and in football, it's okay to have a slow start. I know that when they started 0-2 last year, everyone was freaking out. The Ravens are like, oh my gosh, they're not going to make the playoffs. But they did, and they still got to the divisional round. That's huge. The Bengals were almost in it, and they started out 1-4 or 0-3, whatever. I don't think that starting out fast really makes that big of a difference because those games in the beginning don't matter. When they lost to the Chiefs, we figured if they played them again, they would beat them. And I truly still believed that up until they didn't make it to play the Chiefs. So, but also, I think that if the Ravens got to the Super Bowl, and I said that this year, I said, look, if the Ravens get to the Super Bowl, there's no way they're losing that game because Lamar Jackson and his record against NFC teams, you can't. You can't even bet against that. It's, 22, 23, and 2 or something. It's
Right.
unbelievable. So I think it's the AFC that you can't win out of for anybody. It's hard for Josh Allen. Look at where Josh Allen is compared to Lamar Jackson. Josh Allen's in the same position, still hasn't beat Patrick Mahomes, still hasn't gotten to the Super Bowl. They're in the same time in the league, okay? Yet Lamar Jackson is on his way to a third MVP. That's all I'm saying. Josh Allen doesn't have an MVP. Do I think he
Right.
deserved it this year? Sure, let him have it. He deserves one. But it's going to be Lamar Jackson. And I'm pretty confident in that. And he's shown that with the teams that he's on, whether he does it with Derrick Henry or whether he doesn't. You can compare the stats from this year to last year when they didn't have him. And Lamar Jackson was better this year as a passer because he had Derrick Henry. So that separated himself from a running quarterback to a passing quarterback. I know that's a long winded answer, but the Ravens, I think, they beat themselves in that Bills game. We know that. I'm also going to say that it was a weather condition situation. If they were playing in a dome or if they were playing not in icy conditions, totally different game. But they made mistakes, and that's what happens.
Yeah. When you're a team from the Northeast, you're not used to snow. You're used to, I mean, maybe 20, 25-degree weather, but you're not used to going out playing on an icy field where obviously getting your feet down in the ground is going to be much easier for Buffalo, who plays
Oh,
eight,
yeah.
8 to 9 games there in those conditions a year. So when you think about it, starting off 0-2, like you said, not really going to hurt in the long run, especially when you have a guy like Lamar Jackson. What do you think the Ravens have to do against the NFC North specifically this year coming up, knowing, okay, Lamar is very good against NFC teams, but you've got Jordan Love in the Packers. You've got possibly JJ McCarthy in the Vikings. You've got Jared Goff, Amon St. Brown, Jameer Gibbs. Need I say more about the Lions? And Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, I mean, it's Ben
Yeah.
Johnson. He was amazing with the Lions this year. But what do the Ravens need to do to get through a tough schedule? Even adding on playing the AFC East, Buffalo, Dolphins.
I like that they're playing a lot of first place teams, that they're playing a lot of playoff teams, and they're playing a lot of good quarterbacks, like you're saying, good quarterbacks, good coaches, because every week is never guaranteed. And so I think for Lamar, it's always a good challenge to face an NFC division that they don't see a lot and quarterbacks and coaches they don't see a lot. That's a huge challenge for him. And I know that he embraces that. Every player is going to say that they do because it's just different. You get tired of playing Joe Burrow twice a year. You get tired of playing those guys. They're good. The Steelers have had your number. If you finally beat them twice and you can't win the big game, it's always going to be a battle. They lost to the Browns, who didn't even have a quarterback this year. So, that just happens. But I think Lamar Jackson and the offense is so set to literally beat anybody that they face, no matter what, just because I don't care. You put that offense up against even the Lions offense, they're pretty evenly matched. And I know the Lions have that 1-2 punch in Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery, but they're not Derrick Henry. I'm sorry, and they're not Saquon Barkley. Like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry are one and the same to me. A little bit different
Yeah.
physique, obviously, but they up there in yards and they score that many touchdowns. So I think that you can put Lamar and Derrick on the field by themselves. Forget an offensive line. You don't need it. They're good. They'll make the plays. And when Zay Flowers back and he's healthy, even if he's not getting touchdowns every game, look, we're Rashad Bateman. What a huge guy this year. I mean, that people come out of the woodwork every year that surprise us. And so I think that's the best thing about Lamar Jackson. No two games are the same. You'll see Tylan Wallace go off in a game for an 82-yard touchdown. You won't see it again, but it was there. It was one game. Or, you'll see Nelson Aguilar have a huge game. And he's good for, a 25-yard play every single game. So I
Yep.
think there's consistency within the offense that even if the defense is up against a really good offense, it really doesn't matter. It's all about Lamar Jackson. And yes, defense wins championships. I know that. But they had a pretty good defense this year, the aforementioned Kyle Van Noy and Odafe, not to mention again, the resurgence of Ardarius Washington and Kyle Hamilton and the way that they just locked down the secondary at some points in the season. I'm good. I think this team is so solid if they stay just focused and consistent throughout the year.
Yeah. And like you said, obviously just put Lamar and Derek on the field because, I mean, yeah, Lamar's had MVP numbers passing, and people are like, well, Lamar's had Derrick Henry. Then give me an argument why he still has top in the league in passing yards.
41 touchdowns and 4
21
interceptions.
touchdowns. Yep. And you have
Has
almost a
nothing to do with
200
Derrick
rush.
Henry.
No, I mean, maybe Derek's had what, maybe like two or three of those receiving
Yeah.
touchdowns.
Yeah, I think too. Yeah.
Moving on to Saquon Barkley and the Eagles. What do they have to do this week, this Sunday, against the Chiefs to stop the Chiefs three-peat?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I love Saquon Barkley. I think that because the Chiefs haven't seen the Eagles this year, that it's a completely different game than it was 2 years ago. Obviously, it's a completely different, staff for the Eagles as well, besides Nick Sirianni. But I think they've figured it out. I mean, I think Jalen Hurts, he's settled in. It's kind of the opposite of what
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson did because last year Lamar Jackson was running so much by himself with those touchdowns. And because they got Derrick Henry running back, he turned into that passing quarterback. Now, Jalen Hurts has literally done the opposite. He's
Yeah.
thrown the ball so much less, yet he's getting credit for all those rushing touchdowns because of their brotherly shove. But he's giving the ball to Saquon Barkley 9 times out of 10, which is fine. It works, stick with it. But that makes them, to me, seem like they can't really pull out tricks and different things because they're going to run Saquon. So as long as the Chiefs can eliminate Saquon, the game's over. I mean, they have no other way to win. I mean, they've got AJ Brown. They're not using him, which is fine if they're winning. But I think they need to be creative in this Super Bowl just to make sure that if they do lock down Saquon, they've got other options on offense. Now, for the Chiefs, I think that they just don't make mistakes. And you play mistake-free football, you're going to win every single time because you're just waiting for your opponent to make mistakes. And that's what happens to every single team. Whether you want to say that it's the penalties are the mistakes they're making and that's the referee's call and, they're baiting or whatever, it's still not on the Chiefs. I mean, you can't even blame the Chiefs there. If they're not on the calls or if they're not being the ones that are called, then they're not making mistakes. And that's how they win the game. Look, they're not winning them by a huge margin. So you can't even say that their offense is really great right now. Travis Kelce's numbers couldn't be worse, but they're still winning. So it's like you can't bet against them in my head, but I think that the Eagles have a really good opportunity to take advantage.
Yeah. And when you said about you, yes, you have AJ Brown. You also have Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert, but why? I feel like,
They're just there.
I mean, what do the Eagles even need? They have a top five O line. They have secondary with Reed Blankenship, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell. They have Zach Bond in the linebacker room. They have Jordan Carter and his defensive line. So if you trade AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, what do you get? It's like they have every position accounted for.
Yeah.
you would probably have to spend hours finding a position that they struggle at because they've, I mean, top tier in every position. Quinyon Mitchell proved himself as a top
Yeah.
corner. Uh, Reed Blankenship, maybe not a top safety, but he's right there with our Darius Washington, if you ask me, and he was top tier this year. But switching gears, speaking of trades to the NBA, obviously Luka Doncic goes from the Mavs to the Lakers for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and some picks. If you had to put this in NFL terms, what what would it go down as? Obviously, you have a 25-year-old uh, who's been to the NBA Finals for Anthony Davis, a veteran who has played with LeBron pretty much most of his career.
Yeah, honestly, the way that I had seen it portrayed, I don't think there's anything that you can relate this to in history, honestly. But the way that Adam Schefter was breaking it down, the ESPN insider, he was saying this would, most uh, if you're paralleling it to the NFL, it would most likely be like a mid-season trade between the Ravens and the Bengals for like Joe Burrow in return for Lamar Jackson, and they would just swap teams. But because Anthony Davis is a little bit older, we were talking on WBAL that it's more like Lamar Jackson being traded to the Steelers for Russell Wilson because Russell Wilson is obviously a little bit older, more of a veteran, has won a championship. Because Lamar and Joe haven't won anything yet, it's kind of hard to say that, but they're both those young hot quarterbacks that are just so successful right now, like Luka Doncic is. And so it's hard to compare, but I know that even, we don't talk too much about the NBA because the Wizards are the worst team in the NBA right now. So we're not really covering them, even though they had a big trade today. Um,
Who?
this, yeah, this trade between the Lakers and the Mavericks, when I saw that, it shocked me because I know who Luka Doncic is. I know he's a great player and probably one of the best in the league right now because he's so young, he's so talented. He's from abroad, he's just made it work. And the Mavericks were a great team last year in the playoffs and have such high hopes. I just don't know who benefits from this. Honestly, like I can't figure it out. And it's a little head scratching because yes, I think it's awesome. If I'm Luka Doncic and I'm going to go play with LeBron James, what a dream. But he was playing with Kyrie Irving. Like I get that. And you've been in Dallas, since you were a teenager. I wouldn't want to leave either. But you've got a chance to go play with a serious contender every single year and you're only 25 now. Think of the longevity that LeBron has in that franchise. I think that bodes well for Luka. So I think it's a win in the Lakers' opinion, but they remind me a lot of the Dodgers, all the LA teams. They just want those good players because that draws ticket prices, that draws
Yeah.
fans. Makes sense. I get it.
Like you were saying about the Wizards, obviously two big trades. One earlier this morning, Kyle Kuzma goes to the
Yeah,
Bucks for Chris Middleton. I think that was a really just fair trade. You get a huge guy, Middleton, and you get Kyle Kuzma, who maybe if you get him on a better team,
he can do
better
something.
than the Wizards, who were pretty much worst team in the NBA with what is it, 8 wins?
They don't have double digit wins. They don't
No.
have double.
And then the other trade is a little bit more of a head scratcher for Valen. Not even going to try and say this name correctly. Valanciunas for who was it? City Cisco.
Yeah, I
I
didn't
mean,
see that one yet, but I believe it.
that one happened a little bit ago, and I saw it and I was like, I mean, obviously, I've not followed the Wizards since maybe third week of the season. Just wanted to see what Alex Sarr would do, and I mean, obviously, not much. But if you had to, I guess, say what the Wizards had to do to be better next year, what would it be? Would it be pulling a Luka Doncic trade? Not for Luka, but maybe a trade kind of like that, add in some picks.
Yeah, because they won the draft lottery and have the first overall pick this year, obviously that bodes well. But again, you get a developmental player that is going to take some time. It's not a Victor Wembanyama. I mean, I don't think it is going to be, that type of first round pick. So even if it is, look what the Spurs are doing. They're still not winning
Right.
yet as they would like to. They were in on some trades as well. So I think that the Wizards, if they could swing a huge deal like that and get a player at that caliber, of a huge name. That's what they need. I mean, I remember when the Wizards had big names on this team, Bradley Beal and
Yeah.
KCP, these big guys that are, veterans and were playing really well. And so for them to just dismantle and send guys left and right, and it just hasn't worked out. And I know they're going through this massive rebuild, but it's taking a long time. And you need veterans just as much as you need those draft picks. So similar to what the Orioles have been doing. They've had the best farm system for the longest time. Now they've got all those young guys up there, but they have no experience. So they need the veterans to complete that locker room, to complete that clubhouse. So I think the Wizards are in the same boat. They're on the edge of getting out of that rebuild. It's probably going to take, not next year, but maybe even like 2027. That could be a playoff team if they make a big trade like that.
Yeah. And I mean, you could argue that Cooper Flag, he'll probably more than likely be the first overall pick in the upcoming draft, but is there potential in Cooper Flag? When you saw Victor Wembanyama a couple years ago, you thought, oh yeah, obviously he's going to be the number one pick. He's going to excel for the Spurs, which he has. I mean, he's been postered a couple times this year, which is insane. But you also got to think about it. If you just get a center, how is that going to help the Wizards, a team that's 8-41, lots of turnovers, if you can't even get it into the paint? If you can't get it to the paint, why waste a pick on the center? If you're having troubles at the point guard position, you need a guy like you said. Bring back a Bradley Beal type guy. Not Bradley Beal, obviously, but somebody who can contribute like he did when he was a Wizard.
Yeah, you definitely need a leading point guard. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Kyle Kuzma was a really good player. And you need somebody like that. I don't know. There's something about him that to me, he's not a huge team player. Like, yes, he excels on his own, but you also need somebody who's going to be really good at just racking up the assists. Have them could be contributing to those points, but they don't have to be, the number one point guard in the league. They could just be an average one that helps other guys. So I think that is what the Wizards need. They need a team to collectively work together because all these individual players aren't helping the collective team win. And I think that's the problem. And I know that's why they've gone through coaches and it's just been kind of a struggle for them to just figure out what their identity is, honestly. I mean, I was seeing a stat the other day that they're like best in points off the bench. Well, you're running through the bench. That's why. So as soon as you get those, regular everyday starters out there, I think that's what's going to make the difference for them.
Yeah, and obviously Kyle Kuzma going to the Bucks might be a good thing for him so he can feed it to Giannis in the paint. And obviously, like you said, get those assists that a point guard like him should be getting because he's obviously not going to be on Steven's A list for top five point guards.
Yeah. And that's a huge deal for Kyle Kuzma. Like, what a dream to go work with Giannis and play on the same team. I mean, I love the Bucks because of him, and obviously they are a successful team. So I think they have the right mindset. And again, I think a change of scenery always helps a guy, especially one like Kyle Kuzma I was talking about. Like, he needs a little bit of that difference. So I think for him to be on a new team, maybe that shifts his mentality a little bit, and they could be a really good team. But let's see what the Wizards can do with what they've gotten in return.
Yeah, obviously, Chris Middleton. I mean, why do you need a guy like Middleton when you got Giannis
Hmm.
over there in Milwaukee?
Yeah, it's true, honestly. I mean, I'm going to be excited to see how the rest of the season goes. I mean, we still have time before the trade deadline, so even more could happen. And I wouldn't put it past the Wizards to make, more moves, or even during the draft, which will be coming up later, that they could switch some things around and even make trades during the draft. I would be surprised.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Valerie, again for joining me. I'm Jack here with Valerie Preactor of WBAL Radio. See you guys next time.